Good morning, Mississauga. My name is Trevor McPherson, and I'm the President and CEO of the Mississauga Board of Trade, Mississauga's leading nonpartisan business association, and part of a Chamber of Commerce network of 157 chambers of commerce and boards of trade in communities across Ontario. I will be acting as the moderator for today's debate, which features candidates from 4 provincial political parties. And it's 1 week to go until the election. Can we believe it? It seems like it's been a very quick campaign as far as I'm concerned, but I really want to extend our gratitude for the candidates that are with us here today. Before we get into the official proceedings, I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered here today, both in person and our audience virtually, on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Wendat, and Huron people. We also acknowledge the many First Nations, Inuit, Métis, and other global Indigenous peoples who call Mississauga home, and we commit to doing our part to advance the path to reconciliation. The debate will consist of opening statements by the candidates, a series of questions asked by myself, and through questions submitted by you online, and we encourage you to do so. And that will be followed by closing statements from our candidates. Your opportunity to submit questions is through the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Let me introduce our candidates here with us today. Representing the Liberal Party of Ontario is Topeka Demerla, candidate in Mississauga East, Cooksville. And representing the New Democratic Party is Nicholas Raba, candidate in Mississauga Streetsville. Representing the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario is Nina Tangri, candidate in Mississauga Streetsville. And finally, representing the Green Party is David Zenny, candidate in Mississauga Lakeshore. So there will be 3 minutes of opening statements by the candidates as drawn by a lot just before we went to air with you. And the first opening statement will come from Topeka Demerla with the Liberal Party of Ontario. Topeka, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Trevor, and good morning to everybody. I want to begin by thanking the Mississauga Board of Trade for organizing this very important debate, and all of my colleagues here, fellow contestants. I welcome you as well, and I welcome everyone for taking the time this morning to join us. And Trevor, I want to say from where I'm sitting, it's been a long campaign outdoors. But jokes aside, I just want to say, as Trevor mentioned, I am the Ontario Liberal Party candidate in Mississauga East, Cooksville, and I've been knocking on doors. And here's what I've been hearing. I've been hearing from folks about the cost of living. Definitely, people are feeling the pain in grocery stores, at gas pumps, and across the board. But I'm also hearing that as much as Ontarians are looking for relief in the here and now, a little bit of relief given the affordability issue that is in front of us, they also want a government that has its eye firmly on the long term to ensure Ontario's prosperity. And then there's a third piece to it. They want Ontario to be prosperous, but they also want us to be green and sustainable and find a win-win, a way in which we can incorporate being green and environmentally sensitive, not as an add-on, but as something that actually creates value and puts Ontario businesses at the forefront. And that's exactly what our plan does, and here's what I really love about our plan. Many of our initiatives actually multitask. So for instance, some of our key pieces on the affordability is what we call the Buck a Ride province-wide, which means if you live in Mississauga and you take the My Way, your $3 ticket is now going to be $1. And if you take the Go into Toronto and you live in Cooksville, it's $6, and that's going to be down to $1. Now that helps you with your pocketbook, but it also helps our environment because it's going to take 400,000 cars off our highway. Take another affordability initiative of ours, which is we are committing to take off the provincial portion of the HST of all prepared foods under $20. That helps your pocketbook, but it also helps restaurants in Cooksville and across Mississauga who are struggling to come back after the pandemic. So here's what I want to say. And then finally, because this is the Board of Trade, I do want to say that personally, as many of you know, I have been very invested in promoting small business in Cooksville. In fact, after 28 years of neglect, I finally started a business in BIA, which is the business improvement area for Cooksville, to promote our local business and reimagine Cooksville. So for me, small business is critical, and I'm so pleased that in our platform, we are committing that small businesses who have been deeply impacted by the pandemic will get tax relief for 2 years. So if you live in Mississauga and affordability is top of mind for you, but you also want small business to thrive and you want us to take care of the environment in a balanced fashion, then I would say, please look at the Ontario Liberal Party and consider supporting me and voting for me on June 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Demerla. And next in order, we have Nicholas Rava, candidate in Mississauga Streetsville and representing the New Democratic Party of Ontario.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicholas Rava. I am the candidate for the Ontario NDP in Mississauga Streetsville. And I want to start by thanking the Mississauga Board of Trade for hosting this debate and thank my colleagues for being here. A small business is something I've been around essentially since the day I was born, whether it was growing up working at the Rapid Fine Foods grocery stores or starting a logistics company of my own. I've always known that the SME sector is the backbone of Ontario's economy. However, the callous nature of conservative and liberal governments has turned Ontario into an oligarchy run by giant monopolies. I want to share with all of you some scary stats that never get mentioned by corporate media. 87 families in this country have the same level of wealth as the bottom 12 million Canadians. That's a level of wealth inequality not seen since the days of the pharaohs in ancient Egypt. The private debt to GDP ratio is currently above 350%. The average small business is still carrying $200,000 in COVID debt. Lastly, business insolvencies are back to pre-pandemic levels and only set to get higher. Every single cost input for Canadian small businesses is a monopoly, whether it's hydro, land, rent, commercial insurance. This nightmare for Canadian small business has been made possible by the continuous 150-year-long revolving door between the Conservatives and Liberals and big business. We, the politicians, the SME sector, and the middle class must resist this monopolization of the economy. The NDP plans to tackle monopoly cost inputs directly, the biggest ones being fuel, hydro, commercial rent, and commercial insurance. We will ensure that the cost of doing business is kept low. We will ensure by fixing healthcare and education, our workers will be the most well taken care of and most productive in the world. The NDP's universal pharmacare and dental care plan will mean that self-employed people will not have to pay an insurance monopoly $550 a month just for a benefits package. We are the only party that can lay claim to not being beholden to the monopolies. We are the only logical choice for the Canadian SME sector. Our aim is to partner with and work directly with local businesses to oversee a period of great economic prosperity in Ontario. I want to end my introduction by repeating the fact that the NDP is the only party not in the pockets of big business, and therefore we are the only party that can reduce the cost of doing business. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rava. And next we move to the Progressive Conservative candidate, Nina Tangri, candidate in Mississauga Streetsville.
Well, good morning, friends and neighbors. It really is truly a pleasure to join you all today. As a community member myself, I know how important these conversations and debates are for the growth of Mississauga and for our business sector. I want to thank you, of course, Trevor, and the members of the Mississauga Board of Trade for putting together today's debate. It's been a great to have worked so closely with the Mississauga Board of Trade over the past 4 years. I've really enjoyed our many discussions, and as a proud member myself, they are very, very fruitful. I would also like to, of course, acknowledge those others in attendance, Deepika, Nicholas, and David, for joining as well. For over 37 years, my husband and I have raised a family, we've built a business, and we've made Mississauga our home. And I'm really thankful to be part of the best riding and the best city in Ontario. Many of you, you know me as your neighbour, your friend, and your member of Provincial Parliament at Queen's Park for the past 4 years, and as Ontario's Associate Minister of Small Business and Red Tape Reduction. I'm sure many of you joining today have worked with me at the government level at some point over the last 4 years. Before entering politics, I was an entrepreneur and a small business owner myself for well over 30 years in the insurance and financial sector. After becoming an MPP in June 2018, I was appointed the Parliamentary Assistant to the Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade, with a mandate focusing on encouraging economic expansion and investment in Ontario's world-class life sciences sector. In June of 2021, I was appointed as the Associate Minister of Small Business and Red Tape Reduction, where I focused on growing Ontario's small business community, restoring the province's competitiveness, and supporting Ontario's economic and business recovery. The Ontario PC Party is the only party that will get it done. We have a plan to build new homes, roads, and highways, a plan to give you a break and put more money in your pockets, a plan to create new and better jobs, and a plan, of course, to stay open, a plan to support small businesses and grow our economy. This community deserves a government that's working for them. The great work we've accomplished over the last 4 years would not have been possible without you. If I have the opportunity to continue to represent you, I can assure you that I will continue working hard and advocating for our resilient business community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tangri. And finally, David Zenny, candidate in Mississauga Lakeshore and representing the Green Party of Ontario. David.
Hi, my name is David Zenny. I'm running in the riding of Mississauga Lakeshore on behalf of the Green Party. I'm a math and science teacher. I'm a mathematics department head at St. Paul Secondary School. I spend my free time coaching basketball as a volunteer, both our girls and boys teams, and coaching sailing, as well as helping my wife raise our 2 beautiful children. It is my mission to take immediate action on the climate crisis through embracing a new green economy, building connected communities, and restoring both healthcare and education. I work in our community as a department head of mathematics at St. Paul. My children also go to school in our community at St. James. Education is forefront to the problem facing Ontarians due to the cuts in the recent years. We must improve the funding formula and ratio for students. We must fund post-secondary education better, funding on a per student as opposed to a performance basis. Furthermore, we must increase the number of qualified mental health support workers in schools. The past 2 years have been horrendous on students. I see it daily in my classes where the level of anxiety and the gaps of learning have been atrocious. We need to fix this by supporting our education system with training and with funding at an appropriate level of teacher to student ratio of 20:1. We need to support our healthcare workers. We need to immediately repeal Bill 124 and support our nurses. We need to support our PSWs. Both of my grandparents were in long-term care at the beginning of the pandemic and have both since passed. My grandmother was removed from long-term care, and we could not find a PSW through the LHIN. We need to support our PSWs properly so that we can retain them. If we're going to call them heroes, we have to pay them a living wage. I will work collaboratively with our community to fix the housing crisis by zoning for medium density infill building along transit corridors. This will not affect the character of our neighborhoods, but will increase to medium density along transit corridors so that we can build sustainable net zero buildings. Our party will mandate inclusive zoning for 20% affordable housing. We will double ODSP. We need to take care of our most vulnerable people. We are proposing a $20,000 retrofit for solar heat pumps, and we're going to mandate geothermal in new developments. We want to reduce urban sprawl, protect the blue belt in our watersheds. We must protect and care for all the people in our communities, all the people. It is supporting the people that should be the ultimate goal of our government. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now is the time when we will move to our questions, and there's no lack of issues that we're facing here in the province. I would say issues and opportunity, to be a glass half full kind of guy. But let's start with the first question. The way it's going to work is we're going to have 2 minutes of response to the questions for each candidate, followed by a total of 5 minutes of rebuttal. The first question is this: the city of Mississauga has one of the most diverse business communities in all of Canada. Many businesses were very adversely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and continue to struggle. If your party forms government, what specifically will you do to support these businesses and make sure that Ontario leads the way in economic recovery? And I'll ask the candidate for the Liberal Party of Ontario, Deepika Demirla, to offer a first response.
Thank you, Trevor, for that excellent question. And, our platform actually has some specific planks related to helping businesses recover from the pandemic. And the first one is that we will remove the corporate tax for small businesses hit hard by the pandemic for up to 2 years. We will eliminate incorporation fees for new startups. And we will also, and this is really interesting, guarantee loans to small businesses and help small businesses go digital, because small businesses, often you want to start a small business and the first thing is, where do you raise the money? And you often turn to friends and family, of course, for some seed capital, but then you look at perhaps a bank for a line of credit for your operating needs. And then often it's your house that's on the hook because they need personal guarantees. So that's an area that the Ontario Liberal Party will focus on and work on creating a program that would help backstop small businesses. So these are some of the key issues that are, laser focused on helping businesses recover from the pandemic. And of course, removing the provincial portion of the HST from all prepared foods under $20. That's going to help grocery stores like Rabba Fine Foods, as well as a bunch of small businesses locally right here in Cooksville. As we all know, Cooksville is a food street, and this is a great initiative for small businesses. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And Nicholas Rava, the candidate for the New Democratic Party, will now offer his response to this question.
It's no shock. We've seen the aftermath of COVID-19. Small businesses are really, really struggling. We saw how it was handled when the pandemic was raging. Costco, Walmart, Loblaws all made record profits. They were getting along just fine. Meanwhile, businesses on our main street in Streetsville, they closed. And there was no moratorium on evictions and very little support for small business. If we want to actually revive Main Street again, we have to go with a bold plan. The NDP is going to revive Main Street. We're going to start with grants in 2022 and 2023. These are going to be direct grants to support you guys. We're also going to control your biggest costs that have been skyrocketing, whether that's fuel, commercial insurance, rent. The price of doing business is too expensive, and we can't expect small businesses to compete when their costs are this high. We're then going to have a direct succession planning strategy. Over the next 10 years, about 7 out of 10 Ontario business owners are looking to retire, sell, or pass on their business. We want to make sure that the workers can actually inherit that business. That's why we're going to start employee ownership trusts and do worker-owned co-ops so that workers can have a business of their own and earn extra income through dividends. It'd be fantastic for them. I also want to stress the personal savings that self-employed people will have under the NDP's plan. Again, the benefits package for them to get healthcare is massively expensive. It's going to cost them thousands upon thousands a year. Under the New Democrats plan, dental, prescription medication, mental health will all be covered. They will not have to deal with insurance monopolies price gouging them.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. And it's great to hear the New Democratic response on that question. And I will make sure not to put each candidate in a different party for the next question. So moving along, Nina Tangri with the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario. How will the Progressive Conservatives support small business through recovery?
Well, thank you, Trevor. I mean, that's an extremely important question. As we know, over the past 2 years, it's been very difficult for everyone across Ontario, specifically our small businesses. So all the decisions that our government made, of course, were with the advice of the Chief Medical Officer of Health. And we were there to provide billions of dollars in support for our small business, but not just the support grants. We were supporting with free PPE, we were supporting with capped delivery fees, we're supporting with the permission of delivery of alcohol from restaurants, expansion of patios for our restaurants, something not only did we do through the pandemic, but through my red tape reduction bill, we've managed to make that permanent, something that the restaurant industry have been calling for many years. But I also want to talk about the free rapid test that we provided. I want to commend the Ontario Chamber of Commerce and, of course, working directly with the Mississauga Board of Trade, who have stepped right up very quickly to provide the rapid test for our business community. But there's so much more that we are going to do now. We have a program called the Digital Main Street Program. Many of our small businesses took part in this program. Tens of thousands of businesses have been able to have a digital online presence, have a website, a point of sale online, and that's been a huge saving grace for many of those businesses. And through that also we have what we call the Futurepreneur Program, an excellent program for those people between the ages of 18 and 29, so that they can actually find ways to buy into a business or start their own business, providing them for funding with that. But we also have put together what we call the Entrepreneurship Strategy, where we're going to be there for businesses, supporting them with digital literacy, technology adoption, a digitalization competence center, having the government be there for businesses. So for anyone who wants to start a business, they have a one-stop shop with the government so that they can incorporate their business and have all the permits, licenses, whatever is required at their fingertips, instead of having to go to individual ministries. We're making government work for the people, and there's so much more that we can do, and I'll speak a lot more about it in further questions. Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dangry. And next, we will hear from David Zenny. How will the Green Party of Ontario support small business through this recovery period?
Thank you very much. Throughout the pandemic, Mr. Ford and the Conservative Party rolled out the red carpet for big box stores while letting hard-hit small business suffer. The Ontario Greens are committed to creating vibrant neighborhoods and strong local economies, helping diverse local business recover and thrive. The Conservatives provided a digital Main Street program, but we would expand this program to include non-for-profit organizations and provide fulfillment platforms that better enable small and local business to compete with large online companies. We will expand the staycation tax credit and ensure it includes dining and restaurants. Dining and restaurants have been hardest hit by the pandemic. So we need to ensure that people feel safe and are getting tax credits for eating locally in their small local restaurants. We need to weed out the red tape and costs that disproportionately affects small business. We need to create and enforce rent control guidelines for year-over-year increases that apply to all commercial tenants, including new tenants. I can tell you, my father-in-law ran a bakery at Islington and the Queensway, and their largest problem was year-over-year rent increases. They had to close because the rent got too high for them to stay open. We need to change the regulations to allow boutique wine, craft beer, and artisan spirits to retail outlets to open legally. I love supporting our local breweries and our local wineries, and we need to include independent offsite stores opened by these craft producers so they can benefit from their hard work. And finally, we need to expand programs to help our Black, Indigenous, and other racialized entrepreneurs start and grow their businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zenny. And with that, we move into 5 minutes of rebuttal, and I'll ask whoever would like to respond first, may raise your hand and we'll hear from you on this. Is there any rebuttal?
I can start. Sure.
Sure. Ms. Tangri?
So I think one of the most challenging areas that we're facing today is our labor market. So in just 4 years, our government, we've managed to bring back over 550,000 manufacturing and jobs in many sectors, despite being in the midst of a global pandemic. The unfortunate thing is that the Liberals were able to push away 300,000 jobs. And we've not only brought them back, we've enhanced on that. They had 15 years in government, and they could never have had the employment rate that we have today. We're at 5.2%. So we need to have more skills development. Our government's encouraging our labor force of tomorrow to take up skilled trades through reintroducing shop in the high schools. They need to have more hands-on learning. There's so much more we can do because we have so many vacant jobs that can't be filled right now. So making the changes that we listened to industry, where we had an issue with the previous government, with the College of Trades, where they had the journeyman to apprenticeship ratio. We've fixed that problem. We've got rid of the College of Trades. We now are able to have apprenticeships, more apprentices have that on-hands training as well. Another area that we need to fill jobs is through our Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program. We're only able to bring 9,000 people through that program right now. And we're working with the federal government to double that so we can bring more skilled workers here to Ontario to make sure that we can fill those jobs. There's so much more that we're doing. We're getting it done to make sure that, one, we're supporting all of our businesses across Ontario. We're bringing more investment here by creating that environment to make Ontario the best place to own a business, but also to raise a family. People look at all of those parameters when they're bringing investment here. And we've done it. We're continuing to get it done. Right here in Mississauga, we've brought thousands of new jobs. I'm very proud of the work that we're doing. And we're going to continue on that if we have the privilege of being represented again in Ontario.
Thank you very much. And now I'll ask the candidate for the Liberal Party of Ontario, Deepika Demerla, to respond.
And, you know, it's really interesting when governments take credit for what businesses do. So, you know, when more jobs are created, governments are quick to take the credit, but it's really business that creates jobs. And so for the it's a little rich for the Conservative government to now take credit for creating these jobs, because if they do want to take credit for that, then my question to them is, will you also take credit, or maybe it's the correct word is blame, for the inflation that is raging through Ontario right now? Because you can't, you know, say, oh, you know, the jobs are mine, but the inflation isn't my problem. So, you know, the province is facing record inflation. We haven't seen this in a generation. And my question to, I guess, the government is, what have you done to help Ontarians with this inflation? And more importantly, why didn't you stop it early on when you could have? Why did it have to come to this point where not only the average Ontarian, but small businesses are struggling with inflation? A number of people have made mention of the cost of commercial rent as an example, a direct result of not enough intervention, I guess, by governments to ensure that commercial grade properties are built. There's a big shortage, I know, of commercial properties across Ontario. So where was the government? The government has been missing in action when Ontario businesses needed their help. A case in point was, you know, we all remember when the big box stores were allowed to be open, but the small guy, the small grocer, had to shut down. And I know that, and I will acknowledge that some of it is, of course, evidence-based. And, you know, we tried our best during the pandemic. But the question remains, why was it okay to go into Walmart, but not okay to go into a small business in Cooksville?
Thank you very much, Ms. Demerla. And I'll ask Ms. Tangri to respond, and then we'll move to Mr. Zenny for his response.
Well, thank you, Trevor. I think first and foremost is that governments don't create jobs. The government can only create the environment for those jobs, which is what I did say. Unfortunately, the Liberals, as usual, they believe that governments create jobs, even though they're trying to hide behind that. The fact of the matter is that we can only help by creating that environment by, one, keeping our taxes low, having affordable energy, and making sure that we have a skilled, talented labor force available. Our government, from day one, we listened to our businesses. We worked hand in hand with our businesses to make sure that we're creating that environment, to make sure that we have the ability to make sure our companies are able to come here, invest here and grow here. And that attracts many, many investors from all over the world, right here in Mississauga, and it's working right across this province. It's having access to broadband that can be used efficiently. It's having access to many, many things, roads, highways. One of the areas where, unfortunately, inflation has taken place is the cost of fuel and gas. There's never been a tax that the Liberals and the NDP haven't liked. They always wanted to continue increasing and adding more taxes. We've requested the federal government to reduce the carbon tax, but cap and trade is something that the Liberals and the NDP here want to increase. We're going to be reducing the gas tax by 5.7 cents if we're re-elected on July 1st. And it's a way to support that because the cost of logistics, the cost of getting goods to market's just gone up so significantly. Those costs are then passed on to everything, which is why inflation's going up. It's not just here in Ontario, it's happening across the country and globally. But our government has a plan to support our businesses and find ways to make life more affordable for each and every Ontarian. Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tangri. And now we are going to hear from David Zenny and then from Nicholas Robb.
So the Conservative candidate just said they brought tech back into schools. However, our school population has doubled in the past 8 years. We have only gained 3 teachers because of the lack of funding, and our tech programs have been reduced in our high school. The tech programs have been reduced because of the funding model of the Conservative government. We have lost tech sections, not gained them. Our platform to change the funding model for high school, reduce the teacher to student ratio is so important in bringing tech and arts back into the high school. Furthermore, we are offering 60,000 scholarships for students into the trades. 60,000 scholarships. It should not be a burden to go to school to support the trades in this province. And right now we are putting the burden on the youth. It is the government who has created this shortage. And now we are faced with a shortage of skilled labor. We need to increase the number of enrollments in our universities and our colleges by supporting our students appropriately.
Thank you very much. And finally, for this question, I'll offer the floor to Nicholas Rabba with the New Democratic Party for your response on what you've heard from your fellow candidates.
I don't want to mince words. I believe that the Conservative Party over the last 4 years has failed small businesses and they've failed workers. We saw there was no commercial ban on evictions during COVID-19. So while businesses struggled, they could have their doors closed, kicked right out. Meanwhile, Costco, well, I know it comes up a lot, but it's pretty heinous. Walmart, Loblaws, all making record profits, all allowed to stay open, while small businesses had to shut their doors. They couldn't have 1 or 2 people inside, a little mom and pop shop on Main Street, while Walmart had hundreds of people inside their doors. It did not make any sense at all. And through government contracts, of course, instead of partnering with the SME sector and giving those government contracts to small businesses like the NDP would do, they gave them to giant monopolies like Shoppers Drug Mart. And Nina Tangri is talking about, oh, we brought back jobs and manufacturing. I want to highlight manufacturing as a percentage of GDP has been down dramatically over the last few decades. In 1976, it was 23%. In 2016, we are down to 11%. The GM plant closed in Oshawa. And then a couple of years later, instead of acting on that, instead of investing in the automotive industry, in zero emissions vehicles, what did they do? They lowered the percentage on what qualifies as Canadian content on vehicles, so less cars, less manufacturing can be happening right here in Ontario. And again, she highlighted the labor market. There's a difference between jobs and quality jobs, jobs that actually pay the bills. They have been no friends to workers. We saw nurses going through hell during the pandemic. These are our healthcare heroes, PSWs, early childhood educators, and they were rewarded. How are they rewarded? With poverty wages. The NDP is going to scrap Bill 124, give an immediate raise to PSWs, $5 beyond pre-pandemic levels, and make the minimum wage for ECEs $25 an hour. We couldn't even get paid sick days in this province. She voted them down and the Conservatives 25 times. That's not how you show up for workers. That's not how you show up for businesses either. The NDP is going to make it cheap to do business right here in Ontario. We're going to make manufacturing. We're going to bring back manufacturing in the province and have direct cost inputs on things like fuel, commercial rent, commercial insurance. We want small
15
businesses
seconds.
to thrive in this province. That's why we're also going to have a consumer watchdog to make sure that big corporations are not price gouging us, which is a key factor when it comes to inflation. We are being abused by the monopolies and the big corporations that the Conservatives hold so high and paramount.
Okay, I'll allow you to respond to that, Ms. Tangri, just for about 20 seconds. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Trevor. And just in response to the skilled and the workforce, the NDP always called themselves the party of the labor workforce. Then why? Why then have we received so far up to date 7 major trade unions in this province that are now endorsing Doug Ford and our Ontario PCs, LIUNA, the Boilermakers, IBEW, the Electricians Construction Council of Ontario, International Union Painters and Allied Trades, International Association of Sheet Metal and Air, Ontario Pipe Trades Council, HVAC.
5 seconds.
They are supporting us because we are the party that is supporting them. We're supporting workers in well-paid jobs, completely contrary to what the NDP just
Okay, I do want to move on to the next question. I'll give you 5 seconds.
I'll be literally 5
Nicholas.
seconds. I just want to quickly say she listed 7 unions. There are hundreds of unions in Ontario.
How many have you got? How many endorsements have you got?
Hundreds, including from the Ontario Federation of Labor, which represents a couple of million workers, if I'm recalling correctly. Make no mistake, a couple of unions going to the Conservative side is nothing for them to be grinning at. The NDP has always been the party of workers. We will remain the party of workers.
Thank you very much. And now I'd like to move to a question from our audience, if we could. And this is involving a very significant issue that we've all come to really appreciate over the last couple of years. And of course, that's healthcare, which is a top election issue today in Ontario. What will your party do to address inadequate healthcare services in Mississauga, particularly for seniors, as our aging demographic grows? And for that question, I'd like to ask Deepika Demirla with the Liberal Party of Ontario to provide a first response.
Thank you. And, one of the things that the Ontario Liberal Party is laser-like focused on is healthcare. I'm just going to speak in broad strokes what we want to do high level and then drill down to locally here in Mississauga. It's a shocking number, but there's 1 million Ontarians, 250,000 of them waiting for elective surgery, and 750,000 Ontarians waiting for diagnostics, things like MRIs and CT scans. And I am 100% certain that many of you who are listening in probably are either in that boat or know someone very close who's either waiting for an elective surgery or is waiting for diagnostic tests. So the Ontario Liberal Party is planning to invest $1 billion over the next 4 years to ensure that we get caught up on this backlog. And this is really important because this is in contrast to what the Conservatives have been saying, because when the then Minister of Health, Minister Elliott, was asked what is her plan with the backlog, she said, well, let's look at what the private sector can do. And that just sent chills down our spines, because as soon as you hear private sector coming into Ontario's health sector, you know where that's going. So clear contrast here. Here in Mississauga, it was back in 2018 that the Ontario Liberal government, the then Liberal government, announced the expansion of 350 new beds for the Trillium Hospital, which is at Queensway and here in Ontario. That is going to make the Trillium Hospital one of the largest hospitals, not just in Ontario, but across Canada, with 1,000 beds. Over the past 4 years, I know that it's been hospitals take some time to build, so I'll give that to the Conservative government. But I want to make it very clear that it was the Liberal government that made that announcement. The hospital is yet to be built. As a municipal councillor, I was, did all I could to help expedite the building of the hospital. So that's one at the local level. The other key area that the Ontario Liberal government is focused on is, of course, healthcare, long-term care. Many of us in Cooksville lived through the horror of Camilla Care in Cooksville. And that was so tragic, so heartbreaking. I still remember reading the reports of the Army being called in to help out with the long-term care across Ontario, and the heartbreaking reports that the Army wrote about the state of affairs inside a long-term care home. So our commitment is $2 billion in home care, because the more home care we have, the less there is a need for long-term care. But of course, there's always a need for long-term care. So our other commitment is to slowly transition from private long-term care homes to public long-term care homes, because there should be no profit when it comes to looking after our seniors. And finally, we also want to build 30,000 new long-term care beds and redevelop 28,000 old long-term care beds to standards. So a very comprehensive healthcare plan for Ontario.
Thank you very much for that. And Nicholas Raba, how would the Ontario NDP approach improving the healthcare system, and in particular, supporting seniors?
Yeah, in so many ways. In support to seniors, I want to remind Vipika that there was very little investments from the Liberal government in long-term care. In fact, it was their privatization that was continued by the Conservatives that led to the disaster in long-term care that we saw during COVID-19. This is the problem that Conservatives and Liberals never seem to understand. There should not be profit in our healthcare sector. We saw how the for-profit homes performed during COVID-19. Seniors died. They didn't just die from COVID-19 outbreaks. There was dehydration, sepsis, malnutrition. This is abhorrent. And Mike Harris got millions of dollars in stock options from Chartwell, a long-term care home, rewarding him for his legacy of privatization of long-term care that literally killed seniors right here in Mississauga. When a party is openly taking bribes, why should we even be electing them? The NDP is going to reform long-term care and home care. We are going to make it completely public. There should be no profit when it comes to the health and safety of our seniors. We're also going to invest in home care. We want to see seniors staying in their homes for as long as possible. But when they are in long-term care, we want to make sure those homes are adequate and that they can live a good life and have the nutrition they need, have the safety they need. There is no reason our seniors should not be able to live in dignity. We are also going to hire urgently more nurses, more PSWs, and expand the hours that surgeries are operating to quickly clear the surgical backlog in Ontario. There is no reason that people needing cancer surgeries should have to be waiting months upon months upon months. I'd also like to say on healthcare directly, we are the only party. This is a once in a generation expansion of healthcare. We are going to cover dental, mental health, and prescription medication for everyone in Ontario. We are going to guarantee that in this province, healthcare is a human right, which I'm sure 99% of the population already agrees with.
Thank you very much, Mr. Raba. And moving to Ms. Tangri, how would a re-elected Ford government support the healthcare system, continue to add capacity, et cetera, and particularly supporting seniors?
Well, thank you, Trevor. And I'll just begin with, prior to coming into government, we heard and visited many long-term care homes, for example, on how dire the need was to have more beds. We had too many people that were still in hospital that should have been in a long-term care bed. So we made the promise to increase long-term care beds by over 30,000 over 10 years. Well, you know what? We didn't only talk about it, we took action. We're well on our way to having over 30,000 new long-term care beds, and we're refurbishing over 27,000 long-term care beds right now. But, you know, it's listening to the Liberals talk about long-term care, they barely made 600 beds from 2014 to 2018. It's just appalling, the record on that. I used to serve on the board of Credit Valley Hospital, so I had firsthand knowledge of healthcare and how it works. Trillium Hospital had Band-Aid after Band-Aid after Band-Aid solution from the Liberal government. We took action. We have announced a full new state-of-the-art hospital right here in Mississauga at the Trillium location. Why? Because we know it's crumbling, it's dangerous for those who work there, it's dangerous for those patients that are there, and we're going to make sure we're going to get it built with the plans in place. We'll get shovels in the ground, we will get it built, and we're adding an additional 350 beds to that hospital. Mississauga has grown significantly, but unfortunately the Liberals, they let it pass. They never added the beds that we desperately needed. And on top of that, I mean, there's just so much more that we are doing. The Liberals, they froze hospital budgets. They cut medical residence positions. They fired over 1,600 nurses. They cut physicians' budgets. We are making sure that we are going to be there for our healthcare sector by also hiring 27,000 more nurses, PSWs, and physicians to make sure that we're going to get it done for the people of this province, people here in Mississauga, to make sure we have the best healthcare in the whole world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Tangri. And Mr. Zenny, the Green Party's approach to the healthcare system in Ontario and particularly supporting the healthcare of seniors.
Thank you very much. So the nursing shortage is being driven largely by chronic understaffing, limited resources, constant overtime, and poor pay. We need to immediately repeal Bill 124. Our nurses deserve better. We cannot stand by and watch these professionals suffer. They're front line in our hospitals. The Conservative government talks about building hospitals that is done with the federal money, with municipal money, with the support of prior governments, and they take all the credit for it. They're talking about building a building, not building people. We need to support the people, the doctors and nurses in our healthcare system. We need to support the PSWs in our healthcare system. We need to immediately increase the wage of PSWs to $25. The conditions, the working conditions for PSWs are appalling. We need to improve their working conditions because that will partly address our PSW shortage. My grandparents both died this past 2 years, both of them. They were put in long-term care, a for-profit long-term care home in 2019. My grandfather died malnourished in that home. We had to go to court to fight to get my grandmother out of long-term care. And then we could not find PSWs to serve as in-home care. The Green Party is committed to investing in PSWs in the LHINs so that we can provide in-home care for seniors, which is what they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we'll move to 5 minutes total of rebuttal, starting with Deepika Demirla.
Thank you, Trevor. And a couple of fact checks for the Progressive Conservative candidate. The Progressive Conservative Party did not announce the expansion of a new hospital in Mississauga. That was done by the Ontario Liberal Party in 2018. Re-announcing something that someone else has already announced is not your project. But what is surprising is we announced that in 2018. It's 2022 now. I don't see any progress on that new hospital. Fact check number 2. The first thing the Conservatives did when they came into government was the Liberals had brought in mandatory inspection of all long-term care homes. Mandatory inspection. One of the first things, fact check for the provincial Conservative candidate, they repealed the mandatory inspections of all long-term care homes. So let's not even go there. Let's just talk to nurses on the street. I'm knocking on doors. They're burnt out. So for the Conservative candidate to say that they're investing in healthcare, well, just go and talk to all the burnt out nurses. Talk to all the burnt out PSWs. And that is why our plan, there's $2 billion set aside for home care. So I just want to remind Ontarians as to don't pay attention to the rhetoric, just look at the results on the street. There is no new hospital yet in Mississauga, and the one that hopefully gets built if the Liberals get elected is the one that was announced by the Liberals back in 2018 because Mississauga needs a hospital. Thank you.
Ms. Chankri, your response to what you've just heard?
Yeah, I think it's just really important to talk about making announcements, consulting, doing a study. This is what the Liberals were famous for. They love to make announcements, but they never, ever took action. This is the difference, huge difference between us and the Liberals. We've taken action. We're well on our way to getting the new hospital built. We're going to add that extra 350 beds. We're already working on getting the health, human resources, the nurses, the doctors, and the PSWs already getting skilled and going to school and bringing more of them from other countries. This is something that they never, ever took as a priority. So that's what our government's going to do. Right after being elected, I actually shadowed a PSW in one of our long-term cares. facilities prior to the pandemic. It's a very difficult job. But they had so many challenges because of what the previous government enforced in them. And they found it very hard to be able to do their job efficiently. And they had great suggestions, which we were able to take back. And that's why we actually had a minister of long-term care separate from the Minister of Health as well, to make sure that we can dedicate that time to long-term care where we know there was so much more. You froze the number of inspectors. We're actually adding another 155 inspectors, more than double, to make sure that those long-term care facilities, they care for their patients well, they're clean, and they're making sure that they give them the time that they need.
Nicholas Raba, would you like to weigh in on this?
I absolutely would. I want to remind Deepika that when the Liberals were in power, they didn't do much on healthcare either. They fired 1,600 nurses and froze the hospital budgets. It seems like the Liberals and the Conservatives, they're two sides of the same coin, especially on the Conservative side. I don't even think they're keeping it a secret anymore. They want to see two-tier healthcare in Ontario and all over Canada. They want to see the very rich and the wealthy have access to the best service in the world, while people, workers, poor folk, they have to wait hours in hospitals and cannot get the service that they need. I want, and the NDP wants, one golden standard of service. The Conservatives' legacy over the last 4 years, they've cut billions from healthcare. They shut down the number of public health units from 35 to 10, and they cut nurses' wages, Bill 124. How is this a government that is taking healthcare seriously in any way, shape, or form? We still have over half of Ontarians without the dental coverage that they need. Mental health is a crisis right now, and there are no investments being made into it. And 1/6 of Canadians are either rationing their pills or can't afford their medication at all. We need solutions that the Liberals or the Conservatives are simply not providing. We need a government that actually wants to invest in healthcare in this province, make sure there is one golden standard of coverage for everyone right here in Ontario. That's how we can not only respect our nurses and our PSWs, but get folks the healthcare that they need. It's a human right. I want to stress that again. And their healthcare needs are going unaddressed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Raba. And Mr. Zenny.
So we agree with the NDP about supporting our workers. We will repeal Bill 124 immediately and the troublesome parts of Bill 106. We need to support our nurses. We also need to support our hospitals by increasing their year-over-year base funding by a minimum of 5%. We need to support our long-term care homes. And we need to legislate staffing in long-term care facilities, include a minimum of one nurse practitioner for every 120 residents, and a staff composition that includes 20% registered nurses, 25% registered practical nurses, and 55% personal support workers. It's so important that we support all of these people who are our frontline workers in both long-term care and healthcare. We need to prioritize and mandate a minimum of 4 hours of nursing and personal care per resident. And we need to ensure that our PSWs can work one job and not have to juggle 2 or 3 jobs. When we got my grandmother out of long-term care, when we could finally find a PSW, the PSWs we found were working 2, 3, or 4 jobs just so that they could support themselves. They're not being paid enough to be able to work one job, and they're not being given permanent jobs at these for-profit long-term care homes, so that they have to get a second job because they're not meeting a minimum requirement of 40 hours a week. So we need to update staffing plans and ensure consistency of care. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Demerla, you have a quick response that you'd like to?
I did want to say that the Ontario Liberal Party will also be repealing Bill 124. And I just forgot to mention this, but even as the Conservatives talk about healthcare, I just have one question. What are you going to say to the 1 million Ontarians, that's more than the population of Mississauga, that is either waiting for surgeries or forget surgeries, waiting for a CT scan or an MRI. What is your plan? I haven't heard what the Conservatives are planning to do to address that, other than to say, oh, maybe we should bring in the private sector to help out with the backlog.
Thank you, Ms. Tangri.
Well, so thank you. And just to clarify, it's not what we're planning to do, it's what we're actually doing. It's making sure our hospitals and our diagnostic centers are available now in evenings and weekends. Surgeries are taking place in evenings and weekends as well. The physicians are coming in, the nursing staff are coming in to make sure that we can help with that backlog. The problem is what we were left with from that previous government. We had hallway healthcare, we had a massive backlog of elective surgeries. So with the pandemic, of course, it became even worse. But we have not only a plan, we're taking action. We're getting it done. We're getting those surgeries done for those people who desperately need it, because that's what our government does. We make sure we provide those services for the people of Ontario by making sure they have that elective surgeries taking place in evenings and weekends on top of the weekdays that are already taking place. Thank you.
Mr. Zenny.
Our current Conservative government has failed again to negotiate with the doctors. Our doctors in this province are still without a contract. They've been without a contract for 4 years. And we also need to allow our nurses to collectively bargain their contract. It is so important that we do both of those things so that we can ensure the quality of care by taking care of the staff in our hospitals. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to wrap up this question, but before we do so, we're going to hear from Nicholas Raba and once more from Nina Tangri. Nicholas?
I just want to stress how privatization reigns supreme under the Conservative and Liberal government. Just a few weeks ago, I think it was less than that, a week ago, we saw that a Conservative MPP bought stocks in the middle of the pandemic in one of Ontario's deadliest long-term care homes, because that's what they do. They'd rather put profit before people. We see that in every single way. Subsidies went after we saw the disaster of the for-profit long-term care homes. The Conservative government said subsidies to those exact same homes. This is unacceptable in every facet. We have to get the profit out of healthcare in Ontario. We have to make sure our nurses, our PSWs are actually paid well. We can do that by urgently repealing Bill 124 and giving PSWs a raise. We're going to clear the surgical backlog. We are going to show up for the health of Ontarians.
Thank you, Mr. Raba and Ms. Tangri, for a brief response before we move on to the next issue.
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to provide a response about the doctors' contracts. The OMA and the Government of Ontario have also actually come to agreements on physicians, and I believe that it has been ratified. If not, it will be ratified very shortly. So that has been provided and it's done. And so we're looking forward to working with our great physicians throughout this province to provide the services that they provide and keeping our communities as healthy as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lots of different perspectives and many different policy approaches to supporting our healthcare system. Moving now to a question from our audience, and that is, how does each party intend to ensure that community benefit agreements are integrated into large-scale infrastructure projects in order to support some of our most vulnerable populations to have access to meaningful and sustainable employment? Deepika Demirla.
Thank you. I recall when the Eglinton LRT was being built, and that was started under our government. And one of the big issues was ensuring that the community benefits program was there to ensure that, some of the benefits of building infrastructure projects as large as the Eglinton LRT was that local communities, they're inconvenienced quite a bit in the short term as it's built, and to make sure that they also got some benefits, economic benefits, especially small businesses and people. And so that was something that we championed back then, and of course we'll continue to champion. I think it's really, really important that as we build especially large infrastructure projects, that there's a component of community benefits.
Thank you very much. Nicholas Raba, your party's approach, the NDP's approach to community benefit agreements as part of infrastructure projects that engage and provide employment opportunities to marginalized populations.
I'm going to use this as an opportunity to highlight our Green New Deal. We want to get to net zero emissions in this province while also rebuilding the infrastructure in Ontario completely. We're going to do that by investing billions into hydro, solar, wind power, And what this is going to do, we're also going to retrofit buildings to get them to net zero emissions. We want to see millions of Ontarians rejoining the workforce. That's what the Green New Deal promises. Over the 10-year life cycle of the program, we're going to add 1.1 million high-paying, high-skilled jobs into Ontarians. We are also going to specify employment for marginalized communities, Black communities, Indigenous communities. We want every person who desires employment to have one. That's why a jobs guarantee is literally in the bill. We're going to rebuild our infrastructure, get to net zero emissions, and put people back to work at the same time. We're also going to invest heavily in automotive manufacturing. We have a plan that every single car produced in Ontario by 2035 will be a zero emissions vehicle, and every government contract vehicle will be zero emissions by 2030. We're going to bring Ontario manufacturing back to the automotive sector. We are going to rebuild our infrastructure and put millions of people back to work in high-paying jobs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Raba. Ms. Tangri, how would you approach community benefit agreements going forward in terms of providing our vulnerable populations with access to meaningful and sustainable employment?
Yeah, and I think it's just really important first recognizing that the need is there, and to make sure that we can make sure we're there as a government, we're there as a community for our vulnerable populations. When we talk about infrastructure being built, it's not just the bricks and mortar, it's actually having the programs in place to make sure that those communities can benefit. I want to talk about, I visited just a few weeks ago, just before the election, a program called Homestay, where they take in adults that have autism, where they allow them to come stay for the day, and they can go home in the evening, be with their parents, but during the day, they've aged out of the autism programs, but it's a place for them to go. So making sure that those programs are available where the people can access, utilizing their passport dollars. When we talk about bricks and mortar infrastructure as well, we talked about quite significantly about the hospital being built, making sure we have more long-term care beds being built. We're not only going to build our hospital to add an additional 350 beds, we're doing it in phases in such a way that we will not lose any beds as it's being built, because we need to make sure our community is looked after throughout there. But I also want to talk about something else, Building Ontario Better initiative. It's called Bobby. And that program makes sure that our local Ontario companies are able to do work with government. Right now, under the procurement process, of course, we're going to respect our trade agreements, but we want to make sure that Ontario businesses and companies are able to also participate in working with our government and making sure that all things being equal, we will give that project and that procurement to an Ontario business. But I also want to talk about some of the areas where we're talking about vulnerable populations. We have a program called RAISE, which is going to make sure we support Black and Indigenous communities, youth entrepreneurs, to be able to find ways to start a business, to grow a business. We want to keep our intellectual property here. So we have IPON Ontario, where we make sure that we support those businesses as they do, and really being there for our young people. There are many, many vulnerable populations in our province, and our government's been listening and taking action and making sure that we're getting it done for those, to make sure we're there for them, especially in the not-for-profit sector. And just lastly, as my role as the Associate Minister of Small Business and Red Tape Reduction, we made a promise when we came into government that we would make it easier for businesses, for not-for-profit, school boards, hospitals, and many other sectors to save them over $400 million annually in their costs and regulatory burden. Not only did we meet that target, we surpassed it to the tune of $465 million. That really supports our not-for-profits, for example, where now they don't have to worry over and over again about duplicative regulations, permits, licenses, where they have to keep applying and applying. They can now provide the services that they're so dedicated to those communities, instead of having to worry about government and regulatory burden. So thank you very much. We're there for the people of this province.
Thank you, Ms. Tangri. Mr. Zenny.
So we want to create hundreds of thousands of jobs by retrofitting 40% of existing homes and workplaces to net zero by 2030 and 100% by 2040. We want to modernize the apprenticeship program. So I work closely with our OEAP teacher, the Ontario Youth apprenticeship program teacher at our school. And our students are applying for apprenticeships, and it's very difficult because you have to apply to different trade unions for different apprenticeships. And the whole process is very confounding for students. So we need to modernize this apprenticeship application and the process to an electronic single access to apprenticeship application and registration. This will make it much easier for both companies, businesses to find the apprentices they need, and for the apprentices to find businesses they need. We need to reduce the ratio of journey persons to apprentices to 1-to-1 so that we have one journey person to one apprentice. We need to increase training opportunities by providing incentives to business to take apprentices. And we need to provide 60,000 people with training to work in the new green economy, and a year of free college tuition plus guaranteed work when they graduate by a targeted recruitment of women, men, and Indigenous people and racialized communities into these programs. We need to support Ontario's green business by especially mining, innovation, finance, and auto manufacturing. We need to provide incentives for business in energy efficient, low carbon equipment and investing in fleet vehicles that are electronic and zero emissions. We need to start in 2023 to set a minimum in increasing percentage of public procurement of greenhouse gas intensive materials that must be low carbon. So we're talking about concrete. We need to lower the amount of concrete that we're buying that is high carbon concrete and steel. And we have to help these industries transition to low carbon technologies.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zenny. And I'd like to stick with the theme of infrastructure. And full disclosure, this is an issue that is very important to members of the Mississauga Board of Trade. Mississauga has long awaited action on two-way all-day GO train service on the Milton line. The federal government recently announced a $500 million fund to be matched by the province to make this happen. To each of you, will your party commit to make two-way all-day GO service a reality in this next term of government? Topeka Demerla with the Liberal Party of Ontario.
Absolutely. I believe we are the only party that has in our platform in black and white committed to bringing two-way all-day service on the Milton GO line. It goes through Cooksville and Dixie, both are in my riding. I've personally taken the GO train many times. I used to be a regular GO train taker when I used to go to Queen's Park. I know how important two-way all day is on the Milton line. And, you know, one of the things that I can say is as the MPP back in 2018, I added 6 new trains on the Milton GO line. I was constantly bugging the folks at Metrolinx to add, just squeeze one more train in, and we did our best, and we got those 6 new trains in on the Milton GO line, but we need two-way all day. That's a big economic driver as well to bring people into Mississauga, because it's not just about taking people out of Mississauga to Toronto, but also to bring them to our businesses here and our workers here. And it's unfortunate, but I've seen no progress at all. In fact, it's a dead file under the current government. I haven't heard a thing about any progress on two-way all day service on the Milton GO line. And it's really important for Mississauga and for Cooksville. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Demerla. And Mr. Raba, what is the NDP's position on the Milton line on two-way all-day GO train service on that line?
Yeah, we believe that on a local level, the municipalities know best. So that's why we're going to partner with the municipalities and split the cost 50-50 right down the middle, make huge investments into the GO trains, make huge investments into LRTs, subways, streetcars. This is what more and more folks are using to get around, especially as we see cost of fuel. I didn't check it today. Is it over $2 a liter? Does anyone know? Probably around there. The Liberals' plan, Buck a Ride, it's a complete gimmick. It's going to go away in a couple of years. It benefits realistically a very small portion of people localized into downtown Toronto. And I'm not saying that isn't great. What I'm saying is it's not going to address the long-term transit needs of folks. And we saw how the Liberals governed when it came to transit. Stephen Del Duca, the transport minister, lobbied Metrolinx, supposed to be a nonpartisan company. He lobbied them to put a GO train where it was ineffective into his riding for his own political gain over the needs of Ontarians. How can we possibly trust the Liberals when it comes to transportation when their leader's biggest scandal involves transportation?
Thank you very much. Nina Tangri, two-way all-day GO train service on the Milton line. Is this a dead file for the PCs?
Absolutely not. This has been front row center actually since prior to coming into government. We knew that we desperately need to have two-way peak service right now, eventually leading into all-day two-way GO. It's been a huge issue, of course. We know that the lines are CP Rail. We've been working directly with them, with the federal government, and of course with Metrolinx, very collaboratively, and our discussions have moved forward significantly to make sure that we can eventually have that two-way GO. As we know, the Milton line is a freight line. It is used by CP Rail to bring goods and they pass through on this line. So we want to make sure that we can share the line with them and make sure that we can have that two-way peak GO starting very, very soon. In fact, our government has announced Meadowvale area in my riding as one of our high employment zones. And we know we're a net importer of jobs, and especially in that area. We have people coming from Toronto to work in Mississauga, and we need to try to make sure that we can have the ability of getting them here. That's the only way we're going to get people out of their cars. So it's definitely a priority for me, for our government, and we are working with Metrolinx. Unfortunately, because of COVID, the ridership has gone down significantly. It is starting to build up. And as we get to a time where we know that ridership is coming to its pre-pandemic levels, I know that this will be able to move forward very swiftly. And I'm very proud that our government has taken action on this work. It is sad that for 15 years, the Liberal government did absolutely nothing to try and get this done. And we are the only ones that are going to get it done, because you've seen on the Kitchener line that we've added trains, that we've made that service in Niagara. We have made significant investments in our GO Transit in many parts of this province, and we will make those investments right here in Mississauga on the Milton line. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Merlo, I'll give you a moment to respond. We're going to hear from David Zenny and the Green Party's approach to this issue of two-way all-day GO service on that Milton line.
So we need to prioritize public transit in this province. We need to restore the 50% cost share for transit operations by the province, which was cut. We need to expand all-day two-way GO service to every 15 minutes during peak periods and every 30 minutes during off-peak periods, including on the weekend. I grew up in Georgetown. I went to the high school in Milton. I couldn't get around by transit. If I wanted to go to the city after school, I could not take transit to the city after school. I couldn't take the train. Why? Because it didn't run. Okay. Now I live in Port Credit, and we have two massive developments going on both sides of where I live, and no transit plan to deal with the massive influx that is coming of people. We need to proactively plan public transit. We need to implement our Vision Zero, which is prioritizing road safety of cyclists and pedestrians, and create a fund for municipalities and protected bike lanes as well, because getting to work in a connected community should be safe. I should be able to ride my bike to school where I work and feel safe doing it. And I don't right now. I can't ride down Lakeshore. I can't ride up Cawthra. It's just too scary with trucks going down all the time. It takes me 10 extra minutes to ride to work because I have to go around. Okay. We need to connect people better in the city, build connected communities here, and support our public transit.
Thank you very much. And we'll move now to 5 minutes of rebuttal. Mr. Merlo, would you like to begin?
Absolutely. I'm so disappointed that Nicholas would call our Bucka ride a gimmick because Nicholas, I wonder what the minimum wage worker at your Rabba Fine Foods thinks of the dollar, because you know what? That's what they take. And it means a lot to them that instead of paying $3 on my way, they will now pay $1. So it is not a gimmick for hardworking families. I actually remember one story that stuck with me. There used to be someone who used to work at Queen's Park and lived in Mississauga, and he would take the bus all the way to Toronto rather than take the GO because he couldn't afford it. So he would just take the My Way and then the TTC, and it would probably take him 2 hours each way because he couldn't afford the GO. So it is not a gimmick for working families. The second thing that I want to say is that your plan to put public transit construction on the backs of property tax owners by saying it has to be built by cities, I think you should talk to Mayor Bonnie Crombie and the residents of Mississauga as to what they think about putting that on the backs of property taxes. And finally, I'll just say this to Ms. Tangri that, the past 4 years, has even a single train been added to the Milton GO line? I rest my case. Thank you.
Mr. Merla, thank you very much. Mr. Raba.
I agree. Transit fares are an issue. And the reason I called it a gimmick is they're going away in a couple of years, your dollar a ride program. Am I correct? Or I believe I am. So they're saying, okay, it'll be in place for a year or two, but then we're going to go back to business as usual. What the NDP is proposing is an actual affordable plan that lasts, not just showing up for workers in transit, showing up on their wages. We're going to increase the minimum wage to $20 an hour by 2026, where the other two parties failed to make the minimum wage a living wage. We're going to step up. We are going to give workers excellent healthcare benefits, including dental, mental health, prescription medication, which would save them thousands of dollars and families thousands of dollars annually. Our $10 a day childcare program is going to put women and men who are usually caring for their children back out and into the workforce. And I think investments in transit, splitting the cost of municipalities, we're going to invest billions in transit, is an excellent plan. And it's actually the quickest way to progress.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Merla, would you like to quickly respond to this?
Absolutely. I just want to say that what we've said is that we are going to reduce it to $1 until 2024, and then take a look at, what was the take up and what's the way forward. That doesn't mean it goes back up. All that we've said, this is sort of almost like a pilot, and then we'll see where that takes us. And you know what? I do believe that people should practice what they preach. So I really hope that Rabba Fine Foods is already doing all of the things that, Nicholas, you're sitting here and preaching to all of us about paying $20. Do you guys have sick leave for your employees? I'm just asking the question, and maybe you do. And if you do, more power to you. But if you don't, I think it's a real, question to ask yourself, are you practicing what you preach? Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. And then we'd like to hear from the other candidates.
I just want to say, it seems like everything with the Liberals is it's a pilot. We'll wait and we'll see. Basic income, universal basic income, we'll do a pilot. Transit, we'll do a pilot program. 4-day work week, we'll do a pilot program. They go nowhere, because I don't fundamentally believe that the Liberals are showing up for workers and ordinary families in Ontario. Not that the Conservatives are. I actually wasn't expecting to focus this much on the Liberals. And as for Rabba, I haven't been professionally associated with that company for 6 years. And now I'm proud to be here for this community, representing this community, fighting for things everyone needs right here in Ontario.
Thank you, Ms. Tangri.
Thank you, Trevor. Yeah, I'm just going to bring it back to transit. I think we're talking about two-way GO. Our government has taken action. We're not just sitting back and doing a pilot study or doing something that's, another consultation. We actually took action on having a free transit pass. So for those who may take My Way to the GO station to catch a GO bus to wherever they need to go, whether it's York University or McMaster, we've made that the transit fare pass free. So they don't have to pay twice. That's taking action. This is not a pilot. This is something that we've taken. It's not just initiative, it's done. We've made it happen. It's going to It's really saved people a significant amount of money for those people who desperately need to get to and from work, to get to and from school or university, and just to allow people to make life that little bit more affordable. But just to enhance once again on the two-way go, it has been an issue for many, many years. We've always often talked about commuting to commute. We want to make sure that everybody has the ability. We have the Lakeshore Line that has express trains, that has many trains going in and out of Toronto, through Mississauga to other areas. But the Milton Line has been the one that's always been left short for decades. This is a government that not only will get two-way peak go happening, we will get all-day go happening in our second mandate, if we have the privilege of being elected, to make sure that people have the ability to have great transit. And that's the best way to get people out of their cars. Thank you.
Mr. Zenny, Green Party, and what would your response be to what you've heard from your fellow candidates on this issue?
So we need to establish clean, affordable, accessible transit for all Ontarians. We need to connect our communities across this province, the small rural ones and the large ones. In this city, we have to make transit a priority as we move through the next phase of development in Lakeshore and beyond. We need to proactively build transit solutions into our developments. If we don't do that, we are going to increase congestion, which is what we've seen. And by the way, building a highway through prime farmland is not going to reduce the congestion at Mississauga Lakeshore. We need to take the 10 or 12 or $16 billion and spend it on healthcare and education. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if there are no other responses to this issue, I'd like to move along to the next question.
I did want to say one thing.
Sure, Mr. Merla.
My only question to Ms. Tangri was, over the past 4 years, has any new trains been added to the Cooksville line? I didn't get an answer, but I can say the answer is no.
Thank you very much. And with that, we'll move on to the next question, which comes from our Mississauga Economic Recovery Group, from our not-for-profit sector group. And for those unaware, the Mississauga Economic Recovery Group is an initiative of the Mississauga Board of Trade, gathering more than 50 CEOs of business, of not-for-profit, of academia, all in an effort to work collectively to help build our economy and build prosperity going forward with our many partners. So the question is this: how might your party's approach to fighting poverty differ from how the issue has been handled in the past by various governments to date? Ms. Merla.
Thank you. And there's a number of initiatives that we have proposed. Of course, one of the real issues that our leader, Stephen Deltug, has talked about is economic dignity, because we believe that and I personally believe this, that if you put in an honest day's work, you should be able to make a living wage, the kind of wage where you can have dignity, where you can provide for your family. And that's not happening in Ontario. There's way too many people who work full-time, but the minimum wage is so low, they cannot make ends meet. They have to work at 2 jobs. People who are working flat out. I know personally of a young girl who's volunteering on my campaign. Her mother works as a PSW. She's working full-time, 5 days a week as a PSW. And then on the weekends, she has to supplement her income by working as a housekeeper. That's not the Ontario I want to live in. If you put in 40 hours a week, you should be able to make a living wage. And that's what we've committed to. We've committed that we will increase the minimum wage right away, I think by January 1st, 2023 to $16 an hour. And then we will look at creating a regional wage, because you and I know that $16 in Mississauga doesn't go as far as perhaps $16 might go in a smaller community in Ontario. So that's the first thing. We're also increasing our ODSP by 10% in 2 increments of 10% each. So that is, I think, one of the largest increases in ODSP in a long time. So these are some of the ways that we are looking at making sure that Ontarians have economic dignity.
Thank you very much. I'm just cognizant of time, just to ask our answers to be as expeditious as possible through this next period, but like to hear the NDP's approach to approaching poverty reduction. And Nicholas Raba,
Yeah,
the floor is yours.
I'd be pleased to. Topeka, I challenge you to find me a single place in Ontario where 16.50 is a living wage. The Conservatives and the Liberals are literally legislating poverty. They're doing it through ODSP. They're doing it through the minimum wage. The NDP's plan, $20 an hour minimum wage by 2026. We actually mean it when we say, if you work 40 hours a week at any job, we want you to be able to pay the bills, put food on your table, and live an affordable life. That's why ODSP 10% over, what is it, 2 years? How is that people on ODSP right now are living in poverty? They are seeking medical assistance and dying because they're struggling so much. The NDP, we're going to increase it by 20% in the first year, and we're going to double ODSP in 2023. Our Green New Deal is going to put 1.1 million new jobs into the economy. We are going to focus our jobs guarantee on minority communities, where people are living in poverty, and First Nations communities first. And our OHIP plan, our plan to expand OHIP to cover dental, mental health, prescription medication. Medical costs pile up for ordinary families. It would take a massive burden off of them if they weren't paying thousands a year for dental, mental health services if they should need them, and their medication. This is a real plan to help Ontarians to keep wages high, to keep people living on ODSP out of poverty, and make sure that in a province as wealthy as Ontario, everyone can live their lives with dignity. That is sadly not what we have now. I will fight to make that the case in Parliament.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tangri.
Thank you, Trevor. I'll be very brief, and just to ensure that first and foremost, we recognize many areas where minimum wage, and I agree, strangely enough, with the NDP that $16 an hour she's talking about over many years. So we've taken action. We've raised it to $15. We're going to raise it to $15.50 on October 1st. It's announced, it's done. But we haven't done it just in the GTA. We've done it across the province, because I totally agree that they have other costs that are more significant than we do it here in the GTA. So we have to look out for people across the whole province. But I think it goes back to how do we make sure that we have a skilled workforce? It starts right in the education system, bringing things like SHOP back into schools, encouraging people that we need a vast array of people to work in our communities, whether it's as an electrician, as a physician, as a healthcare worker. Every single area of life is where we want to make sure we have that talent. We have some of the best schools, universities, and colleges in the entire world. We're churning out the best talent. We're investing in our communities. We're bringing that investment growth from other countries to come be here and grow a business. And we just got to make sure that we have the right talent available to do that. That's how you grow your community. That's how you make your economic recovery better. And that's how we make sure we have jobs for everyone and well-paying jobs for everyone. And that is the best way to make sure we can get people out of poverty.
Thank you for that response. David Zenny, the Green Party's of Ontario's approach to poverty reduction.
So the cost of a single bedroom apartment in Mississauga is about $1,800 a month. ODSP is about $1,400 a month, $1,250, correct me if I'm wrong. And so there's a $550 gap between being able to rent an apartment and your ODSP. And if you make money and you're on ODSP, you lose your ODSP. So how can these people live? We don't need 10% increase that the Liberals are promising, or 5% increase in ODSP that the Conservatives are promising. We need to double ODSP in the first year. We will double ODSP and OW rates, and we will reduce aggressive clawbacks. We're going to eliminate necessary red tape, and we are going to support the poorest and most vulnerable people in our community, because that's what government should do. We are going to mandate that development, 20% of it has inclusive housing, so that we can have affordable housing available for people. And when we mandate that we build medium rise, medium density housing along transit corridors. We are putting in housing that is affordable for renters, affordable for owners, and has affordable and subsidized housing 20% in all of these developments. It's so important. We need to support our poorest people. We need to support them through the housing crisis. And it is the government's responsibility. Should we not judge society on how we take care of our most vulnerable people? How have they done in the last 20 years?
Thank you very much, Mr. Zenny, and some quick rebuttal, and then we'll move to everyone's closing statements. And for closing statements, we'll go in reverse order from the beginning, and we'll start with Mr. Zenny. But for rebuttal, Mr. Merla.
Then I just wanted to clarify that we are increasing ODSP by 20%. And the other thing that I wanted to say was, I want to clarify that what we said was that we would increase the minimum wage to $16 an hour, and followed by moving towards a regional living wage. So very, very clear, the $16 is a start, but the real idea is to go to a regional living wage. You can't just legislate a regional living wage off the top of your head. And I don't know how the NDP comes up with figures like $20 an hour. But I do want to make, and it could be the right figure, it may not be, but all I'm saying is what we want to do is go to $16 and then work with small business, work with all of the stakeholders to figure out what is that living wage and what is the best way you can transition to that, because you have to keep in mind that small businesses do need time to react. As whenever government brings small changes, you have to look at all of the stakeholders. So it's a very thoughtful way that we've put out. I also want to remind everyone that one of the first things that Premier Ford did was scrap the minimum wage increase that the Liberals had brought in. So they're a little late to the party to now be positioning themselves as the champions of minimum wage, seeing that they first cut it. And just want to clarify, we have a two-step process, very thoughtful, consult with everyone, and then move to a living wage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Merla. And I'll move to Ms. Tangri for a response to what you just heard.
Yeah, and I think what's most important is that we have an environment here in Ontario to get as many people as possible to work. We have over 200,000 jobs we cannot fill at the moment. So how do we get more people working? Well, there are many ways to do that. First, it's asking our companies to be in our education system so that when they graduate, whether it's from school, college, university, that they have the skills that we need to put them into those good, well-paying jobs. And for example, I put together, when I first was elected, a scholarship program with the life sciences industry, an amazing industry that took on university students and also gave them that one-on-one internship so they could learn about the industry. Is this something that they want to go in? We need to do that right within the school so that when kids are making those decisions about which field they want to go in, they're fully job ready. But it also, it takes a part of the community as a whole. So not just our businesses, include our not-for-profits, include our healthcare sector, to make sure that we all come together and to collaborate as we have, and we've joined the Mississauga Board of Trade to have that collaboration and talk about ways of doing that and making sure that we're all inclusive and making sure that we're there for those vulnerable communities. We recognize that. Well, that's why we have our raise where we're supporting racialized and Indigenous communities with grants to start businesses, where we're talking about our Futurepreneur Program, where we have young people 18 to 39 so they can start their business. We have funding to do that. We have ways to keep our intellectual property right here in Ontario. We have funding available through Venture Ontario, where we'll make sure that latest, greatest new idea stays here, and we build on that. We provide them with that seed funding together with the business community. So we have the latest, greatest technologies that we bring the best of the best from all over the world to invest here in Ontario so that we can have the jobs of the future for all of the people here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Raba.
Sure. The fact is that $16.50 is not a living wage. And she says, we'll wait and see. We'll communicate with stakeholders. Who are those stakeholders going to be exactly? Big business, like they so clearly like to partner with. And then Nina says, oh, $16.50 isn't a living wage. I agree with Nick. We're going to make it $15.50. Well, what is going on here? We need a $20 an hour minimum wage. We need to make sure anyone who works 40 hours a week in this job can afford there goes my pen cap, can afford to pay the bills in Ontario. And no one's talking about cost of living. Under the Liberals, hydro shot up 12%. Under the Conservatives, you guys promised you'd slash hydro prices. They're up another 4%. Gasoline is at $2 a liter. Homes are unaffordable. The NDP has a real plan, not only to increase wages, but to get your costs down, to get the cost of electricity down, make sure homes are a human right, not poker chips for big business and real estate speculators to gamble with. We have to show up for Ontario workers. We have to make their life more affordable now. And there is no reason. The fact of the matter is, I believe you said 20%. I don't want to misquote you, Deepika, on ODSP. And 5% for the Conservatives.
We've done it.
They are, both these parties are still legislating poverty for thousands upon thousands of people in Ontario. They need help now. People need to be able to live on ODSP.
Thank you very much. Recognizing we're a bit over time, I'll ask Mr. Zenny if you could provide a brief response. Thank you.
So I've already talked about our party's plan to double ODSP and Ontario Works to allow people to have to be able to survive, to live and not be in poverty. We need to also take a housing first approach to homelessness. We need to resume the homelessness census that was canceled by the Ford government. We need to utilize a housing first model to ensure a stable, permanent housing solution. And it's a first priority for homeless people. We need to build 60,000 permanent supportive housing units over the next decade through innovative partnerships with private and public and non-for-profit housing organizations. And we need to increase annual funding for women's shelters, as well as safe and accessible transitional and supportive housing options for women and families. During the pandemic, the rate of battery of women increased. The rate of divorce increased. The rate of women in women's shelters increased. There's not enough space for them. There's not enough funding for them. These are vulnerable people with their families, and we need to take care of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for indulging in our questions and sharing the various policy approaches to addressing any one of these issues, which could ultimately be a several-hour debate unto themselves. It's just the times we're living through, I think, when you think about some of the challenges that we're facing, whether it be talent, whether it be housing, whether it be healthcare, et cetera. So it was wonderful to hear all of your ideas. And now we'll move to your closing statements. And we will, as I said, go in reverse order from the beginning. And that means that we'll ask David Zenny with the Green Party of Ontario to provide your closing statement. Thank you. And go ahead, David.
In closing, we need to address the climate crisis swiftly and without half measures. We need to protect our agricultural lands, our wetlands, and our forests, and we must protect our waterways and lakes with the Blue Belt. Water is our most valuable natural resource, and we need to protect it for our people. We need to support our most vulnerable by making mental health part of healthcare and doubling ODSP. We need to support our healthcare workers by repealing Bill 124 and supporting our nurses. We must work to build connected communities by legislating against urban sprawl. Food security is so important. We must cancel the 413 and the Bradford bypass, ensuring the protection of the wetlands, the agricultural lands, and the forests. Our children are our largest investment. We must invest in their education. We must increase the teacher to student ratio to support our most vulnerable students, increase support for at-risk and special needs students. We need to increase support for autism in the school and support the mental health of our students. I see it every day. Mental health is a real concern in our schools. The last 2 years has been really tough on our students, not only because of the significant gaps in learning, but also because of the greatly increased anxiety. We need to put quality people in our schools to support our students. We need to support our nurses. We need to support our PSWs and our healthcare workers. The people of the province are worth fighting for. We need to show them they are worth fighting for. The government should work for its people, not the other way around.
Thank you very much. Ms. Tangri.
Well, thank you, Trevor, again, for allowing me to be part of today's debate. I'm really proud to call Mississauga home, and I've been honored to represent our community at Queen's Park for the last 4 years. Mississauga needs a voice that will be there for you in tough times, a voice that knows how to speak up for businesses, a voice that advocates for you at Queen's Park, and a premier and an MPP that will get it done. That's why over the past 4 years, I've been working nonstop to protect and grow our community and our economy, and have been listening to the people of Mississauga. Ontarians were sick of talk, they were sick of complaining, they were sick of delays and excuses. They wanted a government, a premier, and an MPP that would take action and would keep their promises. The PC government had to clean up the mess and the mismanagement the Liberals left behind. The Del Duca Win Liberals drove away businesses from Ontario with outrageously high and unfair costs. And that's why the Ontario PC Party is rebating WSIB premiums to help businesses with health and safety and with post-pandemic recovery. The PC Party helped create new jobs. We built that environment. We built new hospitals. We built long-term care beds, and we invested in new highways, and will continue to be the only party to get it done. It's our plan for jobs, our plan for opportunities, and it's a plan that says yes. Yes to putting shovels in the ground for new highways. Yes to getting drivers out of gridlock. Yes to building houses that you can afford. Yes to building more long-term care beds. Yes to building new hospitals right across our province. Yes to recruiting more than 27,000 personal support workers, nurses, and doctors. Yes to supporting our local businesses, and yes to rebuilding our economy. As your neighbor, your friend, and your business advocate, I am incredibly thankful for the trust you placed in me over the past 4 years. We've accomplished a lot. And should I have the privilege to be chosen as your representative again, I can assure you that I will continue to be the strong voice that you need at Queen's Park. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much. Mr. Raba, your closing statements, please.
The vast majority of Ontarians agree the pandemic has exposed the flaws in our current system. If we ever hope to truly recover, we need to fundamentally change the way we do politics. Business as usual isn't going to cut it anymore. The history of the Liberals and the Conservatives is crushing Ontario industries to serve big business, their political careers, and wealthy donors. What's actually been the legacy of the Conservatives over the last 4 years? A massive rise in wealth inequality, a graveyard of small businesses that used to make up our main streets, a massive decrease in Ontario manufacturing, stagnant wages with poor benefits, and massive cuts to R&D and innovation. All the while, giant corporations like Costco, Loblaws, Shell, Amazon, they've seen their profits soar. The only people the Conservatives are getting it done for is themselves. If the NDP, if elected, will revolutionize the way we do business in Ontario. Under our plan, we're going to revive Main Street. We're going to give direct grants to small businesses in 2022 and 2023, strategically partner with the SME sector, and provide local businesses with government contracts instead of monopolies. And we will directly control cost inputs like fuel, insurance, rent, saving businesses thousands. We're going to give economic prosperity to workers as well. When the owner of a business retires, we will develop employee ownership trusts and worker-owned co-ops. More workers will own a piece of their business and have extra money in their pockets through dividends. And by providing workers with the healthcare benefits that they need, not only will they save money, especially those who are self-employed, but productivity is going to skyrocket. Healthy workers are happy workers. Our pharmacare and dental program will save struggling businesses thousands by reducing the amount of money they'll be required to pay greedy insurance companies for employee healthcare benefit programs. So if you're tired of your government never fighting for you, if you're tired of big business reigning supreme while you struggle, if you're tired of careerist politicians and the corruption in government, there is a solution. There is a choices election for a government that will put Ontario business and workers first, a choice that will create an economic boom in Ontario. It is just 3 letters long. This election, I'm asking you to vote for a change that Ontario needs. I'm asking you to vote for the NDP. I want to leave the audience with a question today. If the Liberals and Conservatives were looking out for small business, wouldn't they have addressed these problems by now?
Thank you, Mr. Raba. And finally, we'll hear from Ms. Demerla with the Liberal Party of Ontario for your closing statement. Ms. Demerla.
Thank you, Trevor. And I also want to, one more time, thank the Mississauga Board of Trade for organizing this debate. And I want to also acknowledge my fellow contestants. You know, we all come here. We all want the best for Ontario. We just have different plans and sometimes different ideas. And this debate really was about talking about our different ideas so that you can make an informed decision as to what is the best party you think to govern Ontario. You know, we can keep fighting yesterday's battles, or we can look to tomorrow. And the Ontario Liberal Party is firmly focused on tomorrow. The number one thing that I'm hearing at the doors is people are feeling, it's hard for people to make ends meet. At the grocery store, at the gas stations, they're really feeling the pinch. And that is why the number one thing that the Ontario Liberal Party's platform does is it addresses affordability. In fact, we have 17 initiatives to help Ontarians with their affordability issues. As an example, if you're a family with young children in elementary school, we have committed that you will get $2,750 in retroactive payments because the provincial PC government delayed signing the daycare accord with the federal government. That has cost families $2,750 per child on average. So we are committing that we will pay that back to you, just as an example of how we are helping families with your affordability. Look at our plan. And in fact, on average, we've done the math. And on average, if you're a family with 2 kids in Mississauga, our plan will save you $1,500 a month. That is how we are helping you in the here and now, because I know every single one of us is feeling the pinch when it comes to cost of living. The other issue is, going forward, what kind of Ontario do we want to live in? And we've made a clear choice. And the choice we've made is we have said we will not build Highway 413 because, you know, you have on the one hand Highway 407, which is still underutilized, and then to try and build another highway, which could be tolled. We don't know whether it will be tolled or not, but it is a $10 billion highway that is going to go through the Holland Marsh. So, you know, that's the kind of thing governments did 30 years ago, where you would pave over farmland and you go through environmentally sensitive areas and build highways. We know better today that the environment deserves better. Ontarians deserve better. We don't do that sort of thing anymore. So what we've said is we'll not build the Highway 413, and instead we will take that $10 billion and invest it in people. We will invest it in healthcare. We will invest it in education. That is how we are going to be able to cap class sizes at 20. So if you have kids in school, whether they're in elementary school, grade school, or high school, class sizes will be capped at 20. We are going to invest $2 billion in home care so that seniors can get the care they deserve and stay longer at home. We're going to invest $1 billion in our healthcare system to cut the backlog in surgeries and diagnostic delays. We're going to increase funding to mental health. So that's what we're doing, folks. It's a clear choice. We won't build a Highway 413, and instead we will invest in people, because people are Ontario's strength. And the last thing I'm going to say is, the Conservative government has come out with a budget, but no discernible plan. It's really hard. I've heard the Conservatives say, we'll do this, we'll do this, we'll do this, but I haven't seen a concrete action. Yes, we'll improve healthcare, but how? Oh, we are yes for this and yes for that, but the how is missing. The NDP talks a big game, but there's no costing. They actually launched a platform without costing because that's the NDP way. They don't care about the taxpayer. You can talk about, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, because if there's no cost to it, I can do that too. I can build the biggest house in the world if there's no cost to it. They did not cost their platform when they first announced it. The Liberals are the only party that have taken a moderate, thoughtful way. We have costed, we have a plan, and it is costed. Bill Davis used to always say that his mother said that everything in moderation. He was one of the best premiers Ontario had. So we have a clear choice. We've laid out our plans. The Liberal Party has a thoughtful plan that addresses your immediate need, which is cost of living, but also has its eye on the ball in terms of what we need to do to make sure Ontario continues to be prosperous. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marla. And with that, concludes today's debate. I would like to thank all of the candidates, all of you, not only for coming today, but for putting your name forward for public office. It does take a certain amount of courage to do that. And we recognize and appreciate your participation in the democratic process. And I'd like to encourage everyone's participation in that process on June 2nd. I think, if anything, with everything that's happening in the world, we have an even stronger appreciation for the freedoms and the democratic system that we live under here in Canada. So despite the fact that you've heard many different viewpoints and perspectives, I think what Mr. Merlin mentioned earlier, that I do believe that everyone wants to solve the various issues that we do face in our community, in our province. And it's up to us voters to discern, do our research, and make an informed choice on June 2nd. But I do strongly encourage everyone to do that. So with that, that concludes the session. Thank you very much on behalf of the Mississauga Board of Trade, our Board of Directors, and our membership. Thank you.
Thank you.